Audience, welcome to Viewpoint from Overseas. I am your host, Ms. Azam. With me, my regular panel, Mr. Sabat Ashraf and Mr. Riyaz Haq. Today we are going to start with a tragic attack on the Pulwama CRPF convoy. That is Central Reserve Police Force in India, which were going towards Srinagar, and it was attacked by the suicide bomber. And one of the media reports says that as many as 44 people are killed in that. Most of them or all of them are the CRPF soldiers or policemen. We will talk about it, that what it will bring to that region, already very sensitive region, what will happen next, and especially with the reference to the new Indian elections. After that, we will talk about Taliban's talks. These talks are going on recently it went in Moscow, then Washington, and now probably Taliban delegation is going to meet with Pakistani Prime Minister Mr. Imran Khan. Still, we are not sure when and where it is going to happen, but these are the media reports. Last but not least, we will talk about Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. He is visiting Pakistan with a lot of investment opportunities for Pakistan and India. They say that almost $10–15 billion investment he's going to do, Saudi Arabia is going to do in Pakistan, and very similar, actually like 35–40 billion investment he's going to do to inside India. Then he's going Malaysia, then he's going to China and sign some deals. So I will ask my panelists how they see all these things, what is going on there. So, Riyaz, Pulwama attack. How you see that? What is going to happen now?
Yeah, obviously it's tragic. Anytime 34, 40 young men are killed, it's a tragedy. I mean, the problem, these kids probably were young people.
Young people.
Had their families, their children, their parents. So it's basically, that's the number of families that have been hit by this tragedy. However, my concern is that these people, these young men, are being forced into this kind of war, and there is no political process to support them. Usually when you take military action...
When you say about this type of war, you mean to say that what is going on in Kashmir?
Absolutely.
Right? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you're seeing that for the last several years, ever since Prime Minister Modi took over, there's been increased violence. And part of it is because the Modi philosophy is to figure out how to crush these people and rely mainly on the military might to suppress, insurgencies, but that's not working. So it is a natural reaction, when you try and have this kind of violence on a daily basis in Kashmir, that they will respond. So it is unfortunate, but it's the natural outcome of the way the problem is being handled. There is no political process to support it. I mean, we know, like in Afghanistan, for example, both the Soviet Union and the United States have essentially failed to quell them by military force, and they're superpowers.
We are going to talk about that.
I know that, but I'm just telling you that it's a mistake to think that no matter how powerful you are militarily, that these kinds of problems can be solved by military force alone. There has to be a parallel political process, and that is what is missing right now. Just dismiss it as just another terrorist attack. It doesn't make sense, because just calling a terrorist attack is not going to make it go away. It's because the people that are fighting there, they're not just terrorists attacking civilian targets. This was a very planned and targeted attack against a military convoy. The people that were being sent to crush the Kashmiri people and their insurgency in Srinagar.
So I will come back to you, Riaz, again, one more round on this thing. Let me ask Sabahat. Sabahat, Riaz gave us the background of that, what really happened there, and he even gave the reasons of these type of things and how to resolve it. More or less, he mentioned it. How it is going to impact on the incoming Indian election? What do you see? How you see that?
See, that's actually a very relevant question, and it raises some issues, because as the elections get closer and Kashmir, especially for a party like the BJP, is a wedge issue. It's an issue they can use to rile up their base, right? Since this attack happened, even mainstream, very moderate, close Indian friends are worked up about it. It is not a trivial attack. Supposedly the largest attack this century.
34, 44 people
on an Indian security force. So that will affect the elections. It will raise the issue, right? As the elections get closer, raising a law and order always, unfortunately, is used by right-wing parties in any polity. Look at this country, look at Pakistan, look at India. So, in fact, I have at least one friend that was kind of worried that as the elections come closer, Modi might do some more saber rattling, or maybe even do something worse. And this, at one level, this kind of event is way too convenient for a right-wing party like Modi's, and that is a problem. So in terms of elections, that's where this will take it, and that only makes it worse. Again, we've seen what has happened since the government in Pakistan changed, where as any government, and I've said this before on this show, like any new government in India or Pakistan, Imran Khan came to power saber rattling, but once he was in power, he made some overtures, invited some people over to his swearing in and tried to reach out. But then we had the problem of the Indian elections now being, they were half a cycle towards their election. So that became an issue. And this will only raise the stakes. It will raise the temperature and make everything more difficult. And one can only hope that this does not lead to even more bad blood and communal tensions in India, because we all have a stake in India.
Yeah, Riaz, I will put a very similar question, a little different way. Don't you see it now? Congress will take it as a failure of a current government, Modi's government, and propagate that way and use this thing to kind of instigate the emotions.
I agree. I think what is important is to look at the context. The data from National Bomb Data Center in India says that India, for the last 2 years, has had the highest number of bomb blasts in the world. More than in Iraq, more than in Syria, and way more than in Pakistan. So, and this has been increasing, since Mr. Modi came into power. The numbers have dramatically increased in the last several years. So I think that's a problem. And by the way, these bomb blasts were not in Kashmir. Some of them were. But if you look at the list, the highest number of bomb blasts were in Chattisgarh, where they're fighting against Maoists. The second highest number was in Tamil Nadu. The third was in Kerala. Kashmir was fourth on this list. So just to dismiss these as just terrorist attacks and to keep, using military. And by the way, there is more military in Kashmir than in any other part of India. There's about 700,000 total security forces, the soldiers as well as what they call the paramilitary.
Paramilitary forces.
So I think it has become very obvious to anybody who has any sense at all that the Modi policy of not talking, not engaging politically, not starting a dialogue, and simply attacking everybody, including Pakistan. Now they want to do another surgical strike, and they keep talking about these stupid things. Even, Farooq Abdullah, the guy who used to be, the chief minister, said, don't blame Pakistan for these things. I mean, we have a problem here that we need to solve.
Yeah.
So just by distracting the attention of the people in the world from the real problem they have in India to just calling it terrorism and to attack Pakistan is not the solution to this problem.
Do you want to add something, or we can?
No, I think I would just say, just to expand on what Riaz Sahab said, that the issue there then becomes, and I usually say the same thing about Pakistan. Even if you have a neighboring country that is interfering, it is in the end the responsibility of the government itself to provide security, to provide safety. And then we say the same thing about Pakistan, that even if India is interfering or other things are happening, it is the responsibility of the government and the security establishment to provide security and to reach out to their own. They claim Kashmiris as their citizens, so they should be talking to Kashmiris. They should be trying to, and Kashmir at this point is a multi-layered problem. I mean, there is the issue of the original, communal issue. Then there is the issue of Kashmiris not feeling part of India. Then there is the layer of whether, Pakistan's role in that. And then there is, the matter of Kashmiri Pandits and everything they raise about how they feel they've been pushed out of Kashmir. So it's a multi-layered problem at this. And as Riaz Sahab said, there is no real effort to solve it.
No, it's not. I think not only is it multi-layered, but it's getting a lot worse in the last few years.
It's getting,
that's basically the result of Modi's policy.
That's correct.
The Kashmiri Pandit issue is not original. It is rather recent.
It's recent. So let's move to the next topic. Sabat, allow me to start with Riaz Sahab, because Musharraf Zaidi has a very interesting comment on Taliban. I'm just giving you this little bit background why I want to start with Riaz on this thing. So what happened, he say that Pakistan should be talking with both parties, Afghan government and Taliban. They should balance it. Our Riaz said that, no, why don't you talk to Washington and Moscow, who are neglecting them as well, the one government. I came back, and me and Riaz had a long, back and forth conversation. So let me ask Riaz first that what is his view, why he believes that Pakistan should totally ignore the...
No, I don't believe that. In fact, I never said in any of my tweets that they should ignore Ghani. But Pakistan has been talking to Ghani. The problem is that they're not getting anywhere by talking with Ghani. And the issue is, as both Moscow and Washington have figured out, is that Ghani does not really have anything to offer. I mean, he is himself so reliant on foreign forces to keep him propped up that there's no point in talking to him. So what they have done is both Washington and Moscow actually have left out the Afghan government from the process.
Yes.
Because they don't see it as relevant. Now, they are telling the Taliban, please talk to Ghani as well. And the Taliban are saying, no, we don't want to talk to them. So it is not Pakistan, really. It's the Afghans who have to figure out how to talk to each other. Pakistan can simply ask them, hey, please talk to them. Try to figure something out. I think it's in Pakistan's interest to make sure that the peace that is brought to Afghanistan is real and it's lasting. Because otherwise, if the situation remains unstable in Afghanistan, then Pakistan actually is not going to gain much out of it. So I think you misunderstood the Twitter, the back and forth.
But my premise, my thought process came up with some information which I can share without disclosing the person's name. US is trying their best Taliban to talk to let them include Afghan government. And they say when you can sit with even people like Karzai, why not the government? And probably in coming days, we will see that.
It might happen, but I think the reality is that the Ghani government has basically no right, no control, nothing. Mm-hmm. And that is what they need to bring to the party. I mean, if you involve them, how does that help or hurt the dialogue? I mean, I can see why you should have them because, everybody should be at the table. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, they have basically no influence, no power. Yeah. They're so limited. Mm-hmm. that Ghani himself is guarded by American troops.
Of course.
His security guards are not Afghans.
Yes,
so that tells you about how relevant he is to this process.
Sabat, there is another concern a lot of analysts I personally talk to time. You believe them or not, but of course they are kind of insider. They know the news inside. So they say that there are certain concerns that some countries, especially India, may be not letting Afghan government make this thing successful. They don't want Americans to leave. And they will be playing the role of a spoiler there. Even today I was listening Major Amir's comment. He said basically the same thing. I was very surprised that very similar thing 2 days ago somebody told me that this thing that actually these guys they don't want Afghans to sit with Taliban and have a peace because it is not in favor of India.
See, the point there is whether it's not in favor of India or not, or, just a little while ago, we were all talking about how Pakistan was feeling left out of that whole equation and America was dealing with things. And we talked about lasting peace. Like Riaz Sahab said, the goal here is lasting peace for the Afghan people. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem is that is the priority of the Afghan people, right? And of Afghanistan. The other players in this whole kettle of fish or circular firing squad, if you want to call it, are the superpowers, America, Russia, and the regional powers, India, Pakistan, maybe Iran. And then there are the local players. So lasting peace can only be achieved if everyone is at least acquiescing to the final solution. Now, the problem here is everyone has a negotiating position. The Taliban's position for a very long time has been, we want to talk directly to America because America is what matters.
Yes.
We don't want to talk to their, excuse the expression, lapdogs or, their puppets, basically. So that, and if they are going to give up that position that they hold, they need to get something in return because it's a negotiating position, right? In the same way, for India, any of these stakeholders can play a spoiler game, right? Pakistan has been a spoiler at various times. India has been a spoiler. Russia can be a spoiler. The US can. So that is why it is important to have everybody, if not at the table, at least involved in the process. And if you're not going to have India involved in the process, and if India feels that their priorities are not being met, and as Pakistanis, we often say, oh, India doesn't have any direct stake. Why should India matter? Why should India care? Even if we agree that India should not matter in Afghanistan, India can have what historically is sometimes called nuisance value. Mm-hmm. I mean, if someone's not at the table, they can at least piss on everything, right? They are a regional power. They are a rising power. Mm-hmm. They are going to get involved. So we have to find a way of making sure that all the different players have some sort of at least feeling that they are having their concerns addressed. Mm-hmm. Now, when you come to spoiler, now Afghanistan can be seen in one way of looking at it as a way for India to keep Pakistan down, right? Like we saw in the Cold War, Vietnam was a way to bloody America, Afghanistan was a way to bloody Russia. In the same way, Afghanistan can be Pakistan's, well, Afghanistan or Vietnam. So India, and we have to worry about that maybe it is in India's interest not to have lasting peace in Afghanistan. What about that? Yes. So we have to worry about that, and there has to be some way of trying to make sure that how that happens. And at that point, one is led to think that might fall to the US, because India and the US are now strategically very close and politically close. So maybe it will take the US. If the US is really sincere about getting out of the quagmire, then they are going to have to go to India and say, what do you want? How can we make you back up?
Yes. Just tell me briefly how you see what India would want. This is my first question. What India would want, and I will come to you also, get your short comment also. What in your analysis India would want? My second question would be, do you really think if US will pull out from there, Afghanistan will turn to India, Pakistan's proxy war battlefield?
There's a guy by the name of Kautilya, who is oftentimes called India's Machiavelli.
Yeah.
India had a Machiavelli before even Machiavelli himself was born.
Historical thinker.
And one of the things that he used to say is that your neighbor is your enemy and your neighbor's neighbor is your friend.
Is your friend. That's correct.
That was...
in this case, that's very literal.
Yeah. And there's a guy,
very literal.
India's former foreign secretary, has written a book called The Kautilya Doctrine. Of course, he doesn't infer this, what you just inferred from it. But the reality is that, Afghanistan is India's friend because Pakistan
is India's
India's enemy. So, and we've heard from multiple sources that India does use Afghanistan to attack Pakistan as a second front. The former U.S. Secretary of Defense, Chuck Hagel.
Why not Bangladesh is Pakistan's friend then?
Well, now it's changing, right? It started originally.
So I think that's the reality of it. Now, I hope that they can get out of this thinking and figure out a way, because Kautilya's time is gone now.
Yes.
Now there is time for regional cooperation, regional, markets development. Because if it's the economy, as I say, it's the economy, stupid. If the economy is important, then India is missing out on a huge market in Pakistan, and Pakistan is missing out on a huge market in India. If they could work out these differences, then they could probably both benefit greatly from it. But I'm very pessimistic that that's going to happen because these problems are so deep and there has been no progress toward resolving any of them that it appears remote that this is ever going to happen.
I will actually add to that, that argument we often use of that Riyas I've just mentioned of India should look at Pakistan as a market and Pakistan should look at... That is, that's the first level of worrying about economy, right? And because India and Pakistan have never actually had each other as a market except for maybe the first year or two of their existence, maybe we should set that aside. But there is a deeper argument. If the region stays unstable, then the development and, the rise of India as an economy, as an emerging market, that could get affected. That should be the real argument being made here. That if you keep by your own actions or by your own negligence.
The way the Europeans solved the problem was that they created a common market.
That's correct.
Yeah, but
that made a big difference because once you have an economic and financial interest in the well-being of the other, you tend to think a little differently about it.
But then that came after a
big war.
A world war.
Pakistan has had now won 3 wars with India.
But those wars were dead. Disastrous war. Both countries.
So maybe it'll take a disaster. I don't know.
That's
the problem, though, is that the disaster would be very hard to recover from.
Right. Correct.
The big problem, there's these American scientists have actually done some work on this recently. I actually wrote about it in my blog. And they say that if there were a nuclear war between India and Pakistan, and they were to exchange, let's say, about 100 of those small nuclear bombs that they have,
tactical nukes,
that would create a nuclear winter. That would create a cloud of smoke that would cover the entire globe within 2 weeks.
Oh.
It'll block out the sun, and then the crop production would be very badly affected, and there's as many as 2 billion people
Will be affected.
everywhere, including people in the United States, would die because of famine. So this is how big the stakes are, how huge the stakes are.
Yeah, I think I did read your blog some time ago.
So it's and that's one reason, our friend Moeed Yusuf talks about what is U.S. interest in brokering peace.
Yes.
This is one of the things that they worry about. In fact, this is what this guy says, that the generals in India and Pakistan may never have thought about it, but we here would be very badly affected if there were a nuclear war there.
This thing is
So distance doesn't mean anything anymore. This idea of nuclear winter, and by the way, this cloud is going to hang something like 50, 60 miles above the surface of the earth, where it doesn't rain, where things don't settle down. It just stays there.
But and to go further into what Moeed Yusuf says, that what Riyasab laid out is the absolute worst case scenario. The problem is that the scenarios below that are just as bad, if not worse. Even the ones we think about and it is because we now have this nuclear threat that, as Kargil proved, as this Afghanistan situation is proving, that the nuclear umbrella or the nuclear, mutually assured destruction thing only makes the big wars unlikely. The little wars, the skirmishes, the Kargils of the situation, the Pulwamas of the situation.
No, but the reason I brought that up is because we were talking about World War II, a big
you're right. That's
off the table.
That is what, and the argument was that that's what brought Europe together.
Right, that's true.
The problem I was pointing out in this case, you have no way
to come back.
But that's where I'm going with this. Right?
Total destruction.
Because those big wars are no longer viable, that is why we can't have an EU solution, right? That's my problem with, because especially our peacenik brothers, right? Our peacemongers often bring up, why can't we all just be like Europe? We can't. Europe had, and by the way, those world wars were only the final culmination of over 1,000 years of wars.
Of their wars,
Europe, right?
like they 30 years war, long, destroyed
30 years, they had 100-year war,
100-year war.
So that's correct,
exactly.
100-year war, that's true.
That is not a model we can look at, is my problem. We have to start smaller. The problem with smaller then is we are left with Afghanistan. We are left with Kargil. We are left with these situations where people are going after each other at much lower levels. And even more worryingly, they are using this issue in their electoral and social things, right? In Pakistan, the security states uses it as a way of keeping their thumb on the national scale. In India, BJP and all have used these things. And by the way, I also don't buy this whole thing about, it is just because Modi came to power that Afghanistan got worse. No government in India has sincerely tried to solve the Kashmir problem, right? Whichever party.
There's a professor of political science at Berkeley, Indian professor, Agrawal. And one of the things that he has argued, he's actually written about it extensively.
About Kashmir?
About SARC, about common markets, how they make a difference. And one of the things he says is that in Europe, because of the interdependent economically, there's a peace lobby of business interests, a strong peace lobby. I mean, that's the model that he thinks needs to evolve in India and Pakistan, where there's a strong peace lobby.
Peace lobby, that is true.
And there's money behind that peace lobby, that there is a financial interest in peace. That's what he argues is needed, but we have not allowed SARC to go anywhere.
That lobby can only come into existence after there is money to build it, right? In India, Pakistan, we don't have an official we don't have the money already there to make that happen.
Yeah, so that brings me the coming visit of the Saudi Crown Prince, actually.
Yeah.
The money.
Prince Mohammed bin Sultan.
Yes, Prince Mohammed bin Sultan. Mohammed bin Sultan is Saudi Arabia, I should say. They are going to invest on a refineries, almost 10 billion or so. And then in India, 40 billion with a very similar thing, oil refineries and some road or building a road or something like that. Then he goes to China and Malaysia. Don't you gentlemen think, let me, with your permission, let me start from Sabahat. Sabahat, just tell me how you see that, because see, it seems that now, since this area is getting bigger and US and Saudis are a little bit not too comfortable with US after those statements they give, don't you think that this money putting the business opportunities here, they want to have their clients in these region, and that would help indirectly India and Pakistan talk to each other and like what Riyazat say about the peace lobby with money?
Frankly, that makes more sense to me, that if there is an outside investor that is in both of their interests, then they can influence both, or at least both parties can be dealing with that. But the problem with that is a couple of things with that. First of all, they're dealing with, they might be doing it in balance, but they're talking to them separately. So those investments can go into those two countries without those two countries having to deal with each other, which, by the way, frankly, is how business happens in that region. You'd consider two countries that are next to each other if there's a corporation that works in both countries for the regional headquarter to deal with those two countries. That doesn't happen.
Yes.
Pakistan is dealt with out of MENA, out of the Gulf, and India is handled out of the Singaporean headquarters, just for example, on various. And Riyaz has worked in the corporate world, he can tell you that. The other problem with dealing with Saudi Arabia, let me take a step back. The effect of Saudi Arabia and Pakistan is interesting. It's always, it's something we talk about. And I will step back and say that if Saudi Arabia and the UAE and those countries are the chosen foreign policy camp that the current government in Pakistan chooses to throw their lot in with, it is their right to do that. They are the legitimate elected government of Pakistan. They get to choose how the foreign policy leans, right? Now, I personally might think that Saudi Arabia and UAE are, an odd group of people to get in bed with. But they are the government, they are choosing to do that. And in fact, I will give them some credit, because this has also to do with the economic and financial issues of Pakistan, where the Pakistani government, the current government under Imran Khan and the PTI, made a lot of noise about, we will never, Imran Khan even went to the extent of saying we will never take loans. But what his more specific argument was, we'll never go to the IMF. And I think, rhetoric aside, and the rhetoric was overblown and rather silly, but they have managed to reduce the involvement and dependence on the IMF, leveraging other partners, namely Saudi Arabia, UAE,
but that is good,
China.
Right? In one
that is a good. That's what I'm saying.
Good policy,
and that is again, good or bad. That is the policy they have chosen to use, and if it works, very good. Problem is who those partners are, right? We in the US, particularly, as Pakistani Americans, especially since Mr. Trump came to power here, have been quick to condemn the Saudi Arabia on various things, from Khashoggi to what they are doing with Shias and what, that and their role against Iran and the regional issues and ISIS and Syria and what, by the way, the Saudi Arabia is doing with our Muslim American leadership in the US. So on the one hand, we are rather upset with Saudi Arabia. And by the way, I find it very curious and very amusing that our Muslim American, thought leaders or whoever are not yet ready to condemn the UAE. When the UAE is just as involved in Yemen, in all of those issues, as Saudi Arabia is morally,
Saudi Arabia is the leader.
Saudi Arabia is the leader, but the UAE is not very far behind, right?
Correct.
In Yemen, in Syria,
But the whole thing is led by.
It is led by, and I'm not saying that.
So you go after the leader, not everybody else.
But you don't say the leader is.
Egypt is involved in it too.
Yeah, no, and none of us have a very, very good opinion of the leadership of Egypt either. But anyway, so the where I'm going with this is that the influence and role of Saudi Arabia in the politics and the society of Pakistan is a problem. Right? That is something all of us decry morning, noon, and night. And that is an issue. And this, by the way, is not your, as we say, not your father's Saudi Arabia either. This is Mohammed bin Sultan, who is a rather aggressive, Mohammed bin Salman, who is an aggressive, forward-leaning, militaristic, hawkish king. Yes. So it is going to be interesting to watch. There are positives to this. There is a serious problem here.
There could be.
And of course, then you can get into the trivialities of, everyone making fun of the fact that he's going to stay at what
the Prime Minister's house. The larger issue is not Mohammed bin Salman or his morality or his, his values. In international relations, those things are kind of secondary or tertiary. The real thing that's going on, I think, there's a lot of speculation about it. But at least Vali Nasser, who was quoted in the Financial Times story recently, says, and Vali Nasser knows a lot about American policy establishment.
Yeah, he was here.
He was a part of the State Department under Obama.
Yes.
So I give some credence to what he says. He's also written a lot about Pakistan and South Asia. He's even written a book about Maulana Maududi.
Yeah.
Well,
so he's that much familiar with it. So he argues that it's the Pakistan's role in bringing the Taliban to the table that is helping Pakistan get support from the United States in different ways. One of the ways that the United States has helped has nudged Saudi Arabia and UAE and their Gulf partners to help Pakistan out in this current crisis. At the same time, they have given a go-ahead, a green light to the IMF
to just go ahead and cut the deal
Pakistan's
and all
rescue
that.
and work
correct.
with it. Because when IMF started talking with Pakistan, or Pakistan started talking with IMF, the first reaction from Pompeo was that we are not going to allow this thing to happen.
That might have been a negotiating position itself.
Yeah. So what happened was that the things have changed, and Imran Khan obviously has changed. There's before you were in power, there's a lot of rhetoric.
Yeah.
But once you get in power, then you have to deal with real politics.
Yeah.
So he's gone from rhetoric to real politics. He understands the game.
Yeah.
And now he's playing the game. He knows how to get Pakistan out of this current crisis right now. And he's working with these people, regardless of the criticism that anybody brings against him.
So that is all for our show. And thank you, Riyaz. Thank you, Sabahat Ashraf, I Faqir. And this is your host, Misbah Azam. Keep watching Viewpoint from Overseas. Thank you and good day.